The Happy Prince. Seeing people's sorrows made the prince weep. On this night, he could see into the house of a poor woman and her sick son. The prince thought that the swallow could bring her his ruby, and that she could sell it. This way, she could buy food to help her son recover from his fever. The prince asked the swallow to remove the ruby from his sword and bring it to them. The swallow protested because he was expected by the rest of his flock in Egypt. However, the prince persuaded him to do the task. Later, the swallow felt satisfied because he did a good action. The next night, the prince saw a young man writing a play. He was too cold to finish it. The prince asked the swallow to take one of his sapphires to the playwright. The swallow hesitated because doing this would damage the prince's sight. However, the swallow did as the prince commanded. The playwright assumed that the jewel was from an admirer. If he sold the jewel, he could have some money. With the money, he could then warm up and continue his work.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to English for You. I'm Mike.
I'm Chickling.
And today we are in day 2 of our story, The Happy Prince, which is about a prince who was happy, right? He had a nice life. He lived in a big palace. He loved his people and the people loved him. But sadly, he died.
Aww.
And what happened after he died?
Well, people just built a statue of him in a city.
Did.
So he actually gets to see what's still going on in the city.
That's right. Somehow like his spirit, his soul, his ghost is still alive in the statue. The statue is beautiful. It's covered in gold. He has blue sapphires for eyes and a sword that he's holding with red rubies on it. Very expensive jewels. But you're right. From this position looking over the city, what does he see in the city?
He sees people living in poverty.
And a lot of sadness.
Every night he starts crying.
Yes, and sadness and difficulty. And this is something I guess he kept to himself until a swallow arrived. A little bird arrived. This bird was traveling with some friends but got separated. And as the bird settled down to sleep near the statue started crying and explained his problems to the swallow. And that's kind of where we left it yesterday. So let's get back into our story and see how the Happy Prince and the swallow work together to try to change things. We're kind of back where we were with the swallow talking to the prince and the prince saying how sad the difficulties and the poverty of the people make him feel. We read, seeing people's sorrows made the prince weep. Okay, so the prince obviously is a sensitive, kind young man, or was, and he has a lot of strong feelings about his people. So the people's sorrows made him weep. Well, sorrow is basically great sadness, something that fills you with great sadness. You could say, I am filled with sorrow when I heard that my grandfather had died. He was an important guy for me. I loved him very much. He taught me a lot and meant a lot to me. So it's not just like, oh dear, I missed the train and I'm going to have to catch the next one. It's more like, oh, this is a terrible, terrible event. I don't know if I can ever be happy again. I'm filled with sorrow. But the good news is that time often makes even sorrow go away. But yes, sorrow, of course, will strike us all at different times of our lives, probably. And it is a great sad feeling. For example, the news of the terrible train crash brought great sorrow to the whole nation. Yeah, maybe tens or hundreds of people died. And of course, everyone would feel very sad in a situation like that.
所以 sorrow 就是伤心事。充满悲伤的话，我们可以说什么东西 filled with sorrow。比如说 his heart was filled with sorrow after hearing the news. 他听到消息很难过。So 我们知道说呢 seeing people suffer made the prince weep. So what does weep mean?
Yeah, weep is to cry. And probably to cry with a lot of feeling, okay? You might weep when you're really, really sad or when you're really, really upset. You could be weeping. It's basically just another word for crying. For example, Cal wept when he heard that his beloved grandfather had passed away. So he wept and I'm sure he was also filled with sorrow.
So weep 就是哭泣，那它的过去式是 wept，它的过去分词也是 wept。所以呢，比如说 she wept for hours after reading the letter， 她读完这个信一直哭很久。那么正在哭泣也是可以哦，就是稍微有点哭泣流泪小声的啜泣的这种哭都可以叫 weeping。He was weeping silently in the corner。所以看到人们的悲伤呢，使这个王子觉得很难过，他才会开始哭哦。
It says, on this night, the night that the swallow was there, his little bird friend, on this night, he, the prince, could see into the house of a poor woman and her sick son. Oh, dear. So there's the poverty we were talking about. The woman is poor, doesn't have a lot of money, and her son is very sick. Unfortunately, poverty, not having money, can often lead to sickness because you don't have enough money for a comfortable, safe home or good food or things like that. So there's a poor woman and she has a sick son, and you can bet that she doesn't have money to take him to a good doctor or a hospital. This is a very sad situation that unfortunately still happens today. But the prince saw this, and remember, the prince cares for his people. So even though he's not alive anymore, he still wants to help people like this poor woman and her son. It says the prince thought that the swallow could bring her, the woman, his ruby, and that she could sell it. There you go. He's trying to help her out. Even if he's not alive, he thinks the swallow can fly over to the woman's house, bring the ruby, bring that expensive red jewel in his sword, and then the woman can take the ruby and sell it and use the money to buy food and buy medicine and whatever else she needs for her son. What a kind statue.
所以王子呢就想到了呢，那我就可以让这个燕子把红宝石带给这个妇人，他就可以把红宝石卖掉就有钱啦。好吧，那这句话里面有我们今天的 language and focus. Let's take a look right now. 所以呢，今天讲到的呢是连接词 that 引导名词子句当动词的受词的用法。所以这个时候呢 that 就是通常是可以省略的。不过 that 如果引导的名词子句不只有一个，除了第一个连接词 that 可以省略以外，其余的 that 就不可以省略咯，就可以去避免句子结构与寓意上的混淆。所以像由第一个连接词 that 引导的名词子句，我们就可以省略。比如说 reports say that the bird sings every morning in the tree and that afterward it flies off in search of food. 所以这个地方是可以省略的。什么时候不能省略呢？第二个连接词 that 引导的名词子句，像这一句我们造一个句子 The teacher informs that the test will begin shortly. 第一个 that 我们可以省略，后面就不行了。And that everyone should quiet down and prepare. 所以除了本句型的 that 不可以省略以外，我们的 that 子句当作同位语的时候也不可以省略哦。所以我们像下面这个句子 that 子句是当 the fact 的同位语。The fact that Jake and Emma studied every weekend strengthened their partnership in the project.
Okay, back to our article. It says, this way, she could buy food to help her son recover from his fever. The prince asked the swallow to remove the ruby from his sword and bring it to them. So there you go. Hopefully this will, with the money from the ruby, this will be enough for the woman to take care of many of her problems and certainly get her son back to good health.
所以这么一来呢，这个妇人就可以买食物啊，帮孩子退烧，并且让他康复。所以王子呢就请这个燕子从他的剑上取下红宝石，并把红宝石带给他们。
But the swallow, remember, was still trying to get to Egypt to spend the winter there. The swallow protested because he was expected by the rest of his flock in Egypt. He's kind of like, hey man, I'm busy. I gotta go. I can't stay here and save the world with you. I gotta fly to Egypt for my winter holiday.
所以呢 protest 是抗议的意思，燕子就开始抗议了。可是我还要去埃及跟我的鸟群会合，我没时间做这个啦。Did he help him anyways in the end?
Well, you just have to keep reading,
don't
okay,
you? Like I just can't wait to hear. Okay.
Be patient. However, it says the prince persuaded him to do the task. So yes, he did get the swallow to help him. Okay. Later, the swallow felt satisfied because he did a good action. So yes, the prince used some more words to kind of change the swallow's mind. He said, "Oh, swallow, you can fly to Egypt tomorrow. If you don't help this lady and her son, the son might die. You'd feel so terrible, wouldn't you, if that happened? Please, just help me just this one time." And that's kind of how you persuade someone. You use words to try to change a person's mind or to get them to do what you want them to do. Maybe not in a mean way. You're not saying, "Do it or I'll hurt you," or something like that. You're kind of saying, you're kind of selling it to them. You're saying this would be good and it would be fun and you would be better if you did it and it won't be that hard and okay, all right, I'll help you out, that kind of thing. So you're not threatening them. You're not forcing them. It's not like a boss telling the workers what to do. It's more like, for example, the salesman persuaded Boris to buy the bigger TV even though he didn't really need it. The salesman was a good salesman. It's like, "Oh, your movies will look... Oh, you like watching superhero movies? Oh, those will look so much better on this 200-inch TV that's going to take up your entire living room, but you won't regret it. It's a great thing." And the guy Boris is like, "Okay, I'll buy the big TV. I've been persuaded."
所以 persuade 就是去说服，所以最终呢，这一个王子是有说服燕子的。So you can say to persuade someone to do something. 比如说 they try to persuade her to join the team， 或者是你很容易被说服，就是 easily persuaded。比如说 he is easily persuaded when it comes to new ideas。所以呢，我们在另外一个句子也看到说 the prince persuaded him to do the task.
Yes, task. A task is basically a job that someone gets you to do, or a job that you have to do. It might not be a big job or a long job. It might just be something simple, like your boss or your coworker or your mom or dad might say, "Hey, can you go to the store and buy us some bananas?" That's a little task. Often in our day, we might have different tasks to do, either at work or at school. We got to go to the library and find a book. We have to go home and study for our math class. Any one of these little jobs or responsibilities or just things you need to do or you must do, that's basically a task. For example, Randy's last task before he goes home from work is to sweep the floor of the restaurant and turn off all the lights. So that will be his final task at the end of his work shift.
所以呢 task 就是工作或差事的意思。你完成一件工作就可以说 you complete a task.She managed to complete the task ahead of the deadline. 就是在这个期限前，她就把她的事情做完了。或什么事情的任务是很困难呢？ You can call it a difficult task. Organizing the event was a difficult task, but she handled it well. 所以呢，王子说服了这一个燕子去完成了这件差事，燕子也感到满足，因为她觉得自己做了一件好事。
All right, so off the bird flew with the ruby, and the next day came along. And then it says the next night, the prince saw a young man writing a play. So this is the next person that the prince focuses on. It's a young man there sitting there late at night, probably writing a play.
Play 就是剧本的戏剧，戏剧的意思。Writing a play 就是写剧本。所以第二天晚上，王子又看到另外一个年轻人在写剧本了。
He was too cold to finish it. Oh my gosh, this poor guy. He's writing a play, so he's obviously a playwright, as we'll see, but he's a poor playwright. He doesn't make a lot of money. He's too cold to finish writing. His hands are freezing. He can't get the ink to come out of his pen. And probably he doesn't have any money to buy wood or fuel to heat his home. The prince asked the swallow to take one of his sapphires to the playwright. Oh my gosh. So now the prince has already given away the beautiful red ruby in his sword. Now he wants to give away one of the blue sapphires as his eyes. Remember, those sapphires are his eyes, but the sapphire being an expensive blue jewel, he thinks if he gives it to the playwright will be, again, like the woman with the sun, will be able to use the stone for money.
所以 playwright 就是剧作家、编写剧本的人，尤其是职业是当写剧本的人，我们都可以叫他 playwright。所以这一个剧作家呢，他因为太冷了，没有办法完成他的创作，所以王子就跟燕子说，把一颗蓝宝石带给他吧。
Okay, this time the swallow wasn't sure if he wanted to do this, not because he was late to fly to Egypt to see his friends. No, it says the swallow hesitated or waited to do this because doing this would damage the prince's sight. He's kind of taking one of his eyes away. So the swallow's like, well, you won't be able to see so well. However, after being persuaded again by the prince, The swallow did as the prince commanded.
所以燕子其实犹豫了一下，因为他知道这么做，王子的视力会受损。可是燕子还是照着他的吩咐去做了。
And what happened? Well, the playwright, the guy who got the jewel, the playwright assumed that the jewel was from an admirer. Wow, so the playwright, the person writing the play, thought that this gift of the jewel was from an admirer, kind of like a fan. He thought maybe one of his fans who'd seen or read one of his plays was giving him a gift. I kind of like how the playwright isn't surprised when a bird flies in through the window with a blue, expensive stone in its mouth. And he's like, oh, that's normal. It must be from one of my fans. He assumed this, though. When you assume, you kind of think or accept that something is true, but you don't have any proof. You're kind of making a guess or kind of saying, well, before when this happened, it was because of this. So this must be the same situation today. You know, if someone comes in and they're kind of have water on their hair, you might assume that it's raining outside. But then if you ask them, they might say, oh, no, I was walking under someone's window and they were watering their plants or something like that. It's okay to assume sometimes, but if you assume too much, you might end up making a mistake. Like if you assume that, you know, your teacher won't give you a quiz tomorrow and then they do, you're going to look pretty silly. So we only should assume when we're really pretty confident that something is true. It's kind of like making a guess when you don't have all the information. For example, you shouldn't assume that the museum will be open today. Many of them are actually closed on Mondays. So let's check online before we go. Yeah, if you assume and just go, you might waste a lot of your time and, end up feeling silly.
所以 assume 就是认定假定的意思。所以比如说 it was assumed that everyone would attend the meeting. 大家都以为大家会参加，可是最後可能没有全部人都參加哦。
I guess because if you don't, the boss will be angry. So yes, they will assume that people will attend the meeting. And in this case, the playwright assumed that the jewel was from an admirer or a fan, as I mentioned. A jewel is basically just an expensive stone. So when we think of jewels, you guys probably know some of these: emeralds, sapphires, diamonds, rubies, things like that. We use jewels or gemstones in jewelry, of course. The crown of a king or queen might be covered in jewels. And of course, pirates like to keep their jewels in a treasure box and bury it on an island, at least in stories they do. It says the bright red jewel in the woman's necklace sparkled in the candlelight. Wow, that must be a beautiful jewel.
Jewel 就是宝石，总称就是 jewelry。所以我们一颗一颗数就是要使用 jewel 这个字哦。比如说项链我们常常会用宝石做的嘛，所以 Gina was wearing a large gold necklace set with jewels.
All right, and just like the poor woman and the son, the playwright is thinking, hey, with this jewel I can, solve some of my problems. It says if he sold the jewel, he could have some money. With the money, he could then warm up and continue his work. Yes, with the money that he can get from selling the jewel, he can buy some wood or coal or fuel for his fire. He can buy some mittens or gloves for his hands. He can buy some hot chocolate to warm himself up, that kind of thing. He can take care of some of his problems with this kind gift.
所以其实剧作家认为宝石不是来自于王子他以为是喜欢他的人仰慕者送给他的。那 warm up 就是另外一个片语，就是暖和的意思。所以其实剧作家如果把这颗宝石卖掉他就可以有一些钱，就可以取暖，并且继续完成他的创作。所以如果不想错过我们更多精彩的 English for You 内容，赶快订阅我们的 YouTube 频道跟追踪 Facebook 吧。
All right, our chat question. What are some ways you can help sick and poor people?
Just buy them food. Usually if I see beggars on the street or homeless people on the street, I buy them food.
Okay, that's a nice thing to do. You can give them money, you can buy them food, donate to charities that help people like that. That's kind of their job. And if you really want to get into it, you can volunteer for a charity, you can start your own, or if you really want to make a change, get into politics, become a politician, make new laws and new programs that help out poor and sick people, because in countries like Taiwan or, Canada and other places, countries that are quite rich, it really is a shame and almost a crime that we do have poor people who can't afford, to be healthy, to have food, to have a home. Let's meet back here tomorrow because we have one more day with the Happy Prince. And tomorrow, bring some tissue paper. That's all I'm saying. Just bring some tissue paper. Vocabulary Review.
Sorrow. Life is full of joys and sorrows, but Emma always tries to focus on the happy moments. Weep. Amy didn't want anyone to see her weep, so she covered her face and quickly left the room. Persuade. Mia didn't want to go to the party, but I persuaded her by telling her it'd be fun. Task. Sally has many tasks to do at work, so she will have to stay late tonight. Assume. I assumed that Marvin was rich because he always wears nice clothes. I didn't know he really has little money. Jewel. Anna wore a beautiful necklace with a bright red jewel at the center during her birthday party.
智慧小补帖
Protest. Protest. Playwright.